Hey, this is Russ. Let's talk seat post height and suspension seat posts. Yeah, what's the difference? Okay, when you buy an e-bike, there's a seat post where your saddle is attached to it, right? So sometimes the seat post is high enough for some people, sometimes it isn't. Like for me, as you know, I prefer a better pedal stroke, which means I need a bigger extension on my leg. Like I know for a lot of times people will buy a bike and they will put that saddle as low as it can go so they can keep their feet on the ground when they stop at the stop sign and they're still sitting. Yeah, that does not give you the best extension and pedal stroke when you're pedaling, because if you think about it, if you're able to keep your feet on the ground, flat on the ground, the minute you start pedaling, you have to raise your leg up, put your feet on the pedal, and so now you're squished up. That's not going to give you the best power efficiency, okay? So for many of us who have been riding bikes pretty much all our lives, we prefer a better extension so that we can get a more powerful stroke in the pedaling, all right? That means if the post is not high enough, your saddle won't go high enough, you can't get a decent leg extension for the power efficiency. So oftentimes, if I'm riding a 26-inch wheel bike, the post that's supplied is usually sufficient, but many 20-inch wheel bikes aren't. And that's because they know a lot of people who buy a 20-inch wheel bike might be shorter in stature, and some of them want to be as far down as they can. So if they give you a very long seat post, then the minimum height of the saddle might be too high for some of these people. So they give you one that they think is going to be okay for both. And as far high up as it'll go, it might not be enough. So I find that a lot of times when I have a 20-inch wheel bike, I usually end up having to think about maybe buying a different seat post to fit in the seat tube, okay? The seat tube is the thing that the post goes into, all right? The post is the long thing that's connected to your saddle, all right? So usually I'm looking for one that's about 300 millimeters in length. And if I could even find one at 325 millimeters, I would prefer that, all right? And it's not that I need that 325 higher. It's just that with the extra length, it sits in the post more and it's actually more stable and safer than if you pulled that post as high up as it can go and then clamped it down. And it's not as stable that way. So for me, 300 millimeters to 325 is a preferred size. But what if you wanted a suspension seat post? Well, sometimes these suspension seat posts don't go quite as high. Now, the suspension part does add height, all right, to it, but oftentimes it may not be enough. You know, if you're putting that suspension seat post in a 26-inch wheel bike, it's probably not going to be a problem. But if you put it on a 20-inch wheel bike, it may or may not be enough for you. So keep in mind too that when you're sitting on the saddle, that suspension seat post will compress. And when it compresses, now you don't have the height again. So it's kind of you kind of have to kind of play with it, you know, hoping that things will fit. Now, what about the diameter of these seat posts? They're not universal either, all right? Many of them could be 27 point something or 30 something or maybe 31 something inch in millimeters in the diameter of it. So you have to find out what the seat tube on your bike is and what it will accept for a seat post, all right? So you got to do some measurements or look at the specifications of the bike that the manufacturer gave, either in the manual or maybe on their website, and then you have to find one that fits that. Now, what about these things with this suspension seat post? You know, they don't make different size ones for every bike. They may have like a 27.5 or whatever it happens to be, and that's all they make. All right. Well, a lot of them will come with a shim, and the shim will then fit inside the seat tube to fill up that size difference, and then your seat post sits inside that. So your clamp is actually clamping a shim, which then, of course, squeezes around the seat post. Well, what if the shim isn't sufficient? Okay. Well, you can actually buy shims. Yeah. If you go on Amazon, just look for, seat post shim or something to that effect. You'll find that there's different sizes that you can do. Most often, you'll find that the suspension seat posts are thinner than you need. That's so that you could fit it in more different size bikes via the shim, right? I know it sounds confusing, but it's kind of necessary. Otherwise, they would be making all sorts of sizes to fit the various bikes. So they don't want to do that. They want to make one and then allow you to be able to fit that in multiple. So usually it's too small. It's basically what it boils down to. And so you need the shim. Anyway, so why do we want this larger extension? Well, for me, I prefer a longer extension because it gives me more power when I have a pedal stroke, all right? And many other people prefer to keep their feet on the ground when they're stopped at a stop sign, and then they want to stay seated and keep their feet on the ground. They feel they're more stable. But in terms of actual power of stroke, that's not going to be enough, because think about it. If you're able to keep your feet on the ground, when you start pedaling, you got to raise your foot up, put your foot on the pedal. Now you're kind of squished, right? Your leg is kind of squished and you can't get enough power in the stroke. So if you've been riding bikes for a long time, like I have been, we actually prefer a better power stroke, essentially. Does that make sense? So that means I have to have it higher. Now, of course, your center of gravity changes when you go higher up. You're more stable when it's lower down. but if you've got decent balance, and in general, I do have pretty decent balance, it's not a real problem. Now, some have said to me, because I have a knee replacement, I should go lower. No, you actually want to go higher. You want the better stroke. That's actually better for your knee. If your knee is squished up and you're trying to get hard pedaling strokes, it actually could hurt your knee more. So people have been known to have more fatigue when they're squished up like that. So if you want better long range even riding, that longer stroke is better. Now, people will argue with me about that, but I know those who have ridden a bike for a long, long time, and maybe not even e-bikes, but they've ridden regular styled non-electric bike. I will not say acoustic bike, all right, because it's not. I hate that word. let me say that. You know how that came about? People said, well, there's electric guitars and acoustic guitars. So if you got electric bikes, you got acoustic bikes. No, you don't. Think about what the word acoustic means. It has to deal with sound. Okay, what do you got, a sound bike? So you'll never hear me call it an acoustic bike, because there's no such thing. Get your terminology right, people. All right. Anyway, that was my little rant. So anyways, if you've been riding a non-electric bike, all right, I prefer that term better. You'll agree with me that you need a better stroke, right, on the ride. It'll get you more power. Anyways, that's all I really wanted to say in this video today. Talk a little bit about suspension seat post height, and the like. Yeah, if it's not sufficient for you, go on Amazon or someplace else and look for longer seat posts. And if you want the suspension seat post type, look for that, but make sure you get the proper shim size that'll fit inside the seat tube of your bike. All right, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. E-bike videos will be on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, as you know. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays is Russ Talk videos, where I'm in the car and talking about anything I feel like talking about. Talk to you guys next time.